So, ladies and gentlemen, this is another one of my NHL historical podcasts. I'd like to thank everybody for supporting these ones. I'm getting some great comments and likes on it. But what we're going to talk about today is probably a 40th anniversary tribute to what a lot of people consider, if not the best playoff game of the 1970s, is pretty close. Game 7, Boston Bruins versus the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup semifinal. Pretty well, the winner of the series was going to go on to win the Stanley Cup. Now, let's look back for a second. The Montreal Canadiens had won three straight cups, but the talent on the team was waning a little bit. There was a lot of grumblings about Bowman maybe leaving. Certain players dissatisfied, certain players a little bit old in the tooth. And Boston was on the upswing. They had a really good regular season. And into playoffs where Boston had lost twice to Montreal in the final 2 years previously, they seemed to be more ready for Montreal than ever before. Led by Don Cherry and a great cast of role players, grinders, and superstars. It seemed this was going to be the night. Now, a little bit of background with the series. Montreal won the first two games of the series. Went back to Boston. Boston tied it back up, including one game in overtime. They came back to Montreal. Montreal won Game 5, and then Boston, like they did the whole series, dominated the Cardinals to win Game 6 5-2, which set up the May 10th game. Now, this contest is known for many, many things. First of all, too many men on the ice, which pretty well everybody in hockey knows that, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, when I talked to one of the key characters in this game, Rick Middleton, of all people, very great guy, covered him at the alumni game for the Boston Bruins in Woodstock in 2010. Middleton told me a lot of things about the game and a lot of things about the rivalry, which, due to secrecy and respecting the interview, I don't want to repeat here. But let me say that Rick Middleton really enjoyed playing against the Montreal Canadiens. He loved the rivalry. And it was him that opened the scoring in the first period on a feed from Dickie Redmond and Wayne Cashman. From early on, we figured out that maybe Dryden wasn't ready to do his great, what do you call it, money goaltending this game. Middleton told me, if anything, Dryden was kind of put off by the quickness of Boston's offense that year. But of course, like Montreal would do in the playoffs, there was always a role player would come back. Montreal tied the game at 14-19 of the first on a big goal by Jacques Lemaire from Savard and Lapointe. And by the end of the first period, they were tied, but you could almost see the writing on the wall. And in the second period, that old stalwart of former Team Canada forward Wayne Cashman scored probably two of the biggest goals of his career, or would have been, if Boston would have, of course, been successful in the game, but that's a little bit later on. Cashman scored his third of the playoffs at 27 seconds from Middleton and Rattel, and his fourth of the playoffs from Rattel and Middleton at 16-12. And the whole period was dominated by Boston. We figured 3-1 after the second period. The way it was Dryden was being played. There was also thought going on maybe Dryden should have been pulled after the second period because of his inconsistent play. But Bowman stuck with him, and it kind of paid off a little bit because at the start of the third, Montreal got a lot of momentum. The young Mark Napier scored his second in the playoffs from Lafleur and Tremblay at 6-10. And then in a very, very big point shot from Guy Lapointe, the second of the playoffs at 8-18, tied it on a feed from Lafleur and Gainey. Now, the next 8 minutes of the game were back and forth, but until Rick Middleton scored with less than 4 minutes left, we thought that basically this was it for Montreal. There was no way they could come back because other than Lafleur, the rest of the offensive players of Montreal were being held in check or making mistakes. But what happened, allegedly, Middleton and different people had said there was about 7 or 8 players from the Bruins on the ice at the same time in a late call. I think it was less than 2 minutes left in the call. Yeah, 17:26. Served by Peter McNabb. From what I saw when I watched the game, I watched it live. There was a shift change in relation to, I guess, getting a line on to compete against Lafleur's line, and somebody stayed on. Some people say it's Marcotte, some people saying it's Middleton, some people saying could have been one of the defensemen. Either way, there were 6 or 7 players on the ice on a regular basis. And in this case, if you watch the tape, the fans noticed it first before the ref did, and he had no choice. Don Cherry basically later on said, well, it had to be called because there was no hometown taking it from Montreal here. We have 7 players on the ice, and the fans notice it. You got to call it. Now, the first minute of the power play went kind of inconsistent, but in the second minute, of course, Guy Lafleur, who always picked up steam in his own end, he sent a feed to Lambert. Lambert passed back. Big, hard slap shot pass to great Gilles Gilbert, and here we were tied, almost heading into overtime in one of the biggest shots of Lafleur's career. Lafleur would always say, which I met again 2010 at another alumni game for the Montreal Canadiens, he always said to the media, and it's well known, if you shoot the puck on the ice, it could go in because a goaltender is looking not only for the high shot, he's looking for something that he can save, and a good hard shot against the ice is like skipping a rock in the water. It's going to go in, and this happened to Gilbert goal. Now, some people criticize Gilbert that maybe he wasn't ready or he was too tired to stop it. He got 52 shots against him that game. Allegedly, according to CompuStats, Montreal threw 100 potential shots against Gilbert and only 52 hit the net, which is kind of a high count. Now, when it went into overtime, it was back and forth for a while, but Montreal was dominating the play. At the time of the goal, they were out shooting Boston 7-3, and if you look at the tape correctly, Middleton went on a single-man rush a la Peter Mahovlich up to the zone. Sir Savard got the puck back. He headmaned it into Houle, who passed it to Tremblay. And this was a set play. This was a design play that Claude Well and Scotty Bowman would use at times. He passed across the ice to Lambert near the net. Some people say it was kicked in. No, it hit his stick. And Lambert was celebrated beyond the beyond. Everybody came off the ice. Came off the bench. Even Lambert took his stick and gave him 3 whacks in his leg, saying, "Good job, boy, good job." Lambert in 1991, that name dropping like crazy. Too bad. I met all these people. Lambert said it was the biggest goal he never scored. He felt like he scored it, but like it sent Canadians to euphoria. Now, why this is very significant? This is the last major call by Danny Galvin in the Montreal Canadiens championship years. For some reason, he didn't announce the final. Dan Kelly did it against the Rangers. The advance against the Rangers were no match for Montreal, even though they won the opening game, and Dryden was supposed to not start game 2, but the destiny was there. But this game was like a chess game, like a film noir almost. If you're a Boston fan in the 1970s, the Red Sox and the Bruins, great teams, but it was always a team that was stopping you. For the Red Sox, it was the Yankees. For Boston, it was the Montreal Canadiens. Sure, Boston has bet Montreal a few times over years in the playoffs, but God must be a Montreal Canadiens fan, because my God, the way Boston lost in the 70s to Montreal in a different series dating back to 71, the infamous Game 2 where Montreal made the big comeback from 5-1 down. This game, if anything, is an example where the better team may lose. The Montreal Canadiens in this evening only had maybe 4 players that were consistent: Gainey, Lafleur, Lemaire, and Lapointe. Lapointe was injured after he scored a goal. He wasn't around to have the big shot. But the goal happened so quickly. If you, like I said, you look at it closely, it's like it was like a basketball set play. There was no goalie in the history of the NHL could even stop a goal like that, because it's a high percentage shot. So if you have a chance, there's various YouTube versions of the full game. There's a shortened version that has the highlights, about an hour. There's a full game. But get yourself a case of beer or a case of pop or juice or whatever, and sit down with family members either that saw the game live, were Montreal fans in the 70s, or the current fans, and just see the discussion would go. A lot of people had a theory that the referees took up for Montreal Canadiens. This is not true. There was penalties in this game, should have been called to Boston or Montreal. The playoff calls by the refs were always inconsistent in the form, because the fans were basically, right on them, and like maybe they felt intimidated, and maybe to call or not call against both teams that were playing. So on this beautiful day where it's high winds in New Brunswick, and we're still recovering from that storm yesterday, some places got a foot. This podcast is shout out to all my friends in Dalhousie minor hockey, including Bobby Freeze, Todd Williams, a few others. They were big fans of hockey as players, developers, and are still very consistent. But this game can teach any coach or assistant coach or whatever to always, always, always try to outplay your opponent. Never take things for advantage. Boston always came back against Montreal and lost. In this case, it was. But see, this is a game where Montreal had to be outplayed, which they were, but they weren't outplayed enough. You know, to beat the king, you must give that third knife strike. Game of Thrones, you must make sure the villain's dead, cut the head off. And here they gave him a mortal wound, but the head was the flower, Guy Lafleur, and you couldn't stop the flower tonight. That night. 3 points in the third period. That was like 15 in a regular season. Wouldn't be for Guy Lafleur. That cup belongs to him. You only should have one name on that cup. Guy Lafleur and Company. That's the way it was. So on this great day, have a good one. Keep your stick in the ice and keep smiling, Apollo. Have a good one. Bye.